Hi everyone, my name is Anea. Welcome to my channel. Today we have not a pregnancy update, but actually a birth story. So last people heard, I believe I had recorded my 31-week video and I was 32 weeks at the time. Uh, I posted that video the day I recorded it on Thursday and went about my day like I normally do and went to bed. Um, Everything was normal. I woke up at like 2:30ish, and per usual at around that time I needed to pee. So I started to roll over, and as soon as I started moving, I just started peeing myself. Uh, Thankfully, I managed to scurry off the bed quick enough to not get any on the bed. However, I could not stop it. Um, so I had to like scurry to the bathroom while leaving a trail of pee behind me. Um, and I got to the bathroom. I used the bathroom, and while I was sitting on the toilet, I noticed that I was having some mild cramping that was pretty consistent. Um, I got up and I wiped and I noticed bright red blood. And so, with a towel under my feet, I shuffled to the bedroom along my pee trail, uh, and kind of was just calmly pacing around, just listening to my body. And uh, Tristan woke up and saw me standing beside the bed and asked what was going on. And I told him that one, I just peed myself, uh, and two, that I went to the bathroom and I am bleeding, and three, I'm having cramps that are slowly getting stronger, but at this point they're still like decently mild. And so I was pretty sure I needed to go to labor and delivery to get checked out. But I wanted to make sure, so I called labor and delivery, explained what was happening, and they were like, yes, you should come in. Originally, I told Tristan that he could stay home, because I assumed I was going to go in. They were, going to check me over. I was going to be fine, or there was going to be something, that they could fix or something, and I'd be sent back home. And I wanted Tristan to be home to look after Ponyo, our puppy. But he's like, no, I'm coming with you, obviously. And he grabbed my partially packed hospital bags because I was still working on it. Um, and we drove to the hospital. While we were in the car, my cramps were getting worse. And at this point, I was starting to question whether or not these were cramps or contractions. Um, I was having to, I could still talk through them, but I was having to deliberately breathe through them at this point. So I started using a contraction counter, but I only got a couple of contractions in before we got there to the hospital, that is. And We make our way up. Tristan drops me off at the ER doors because at this late at night, you have to go through the ER to get up to labor and delivery. The main entrance isn't open. And I started making my way up, and Tristan went and parked and came up and found me. And we get to labor and delivery, and my cramps are starting to like cramp. Um, I get changed into a gown, and much like last time, they get me to sit on or to lay on the bed, and they hook up fetal monitors to me. And at this point, the cramps are like getting painful. I can't talk through them anymore. Um, and I'm consciously like breathing through them, slowly starting to moan because of the pain. And I was starting to get really anxious, um, not because I understood that I was in labor yet, but because the pain that I was experiencing was feeling identical to the pain that I experienced during my first miscarriage. And so that was a really triggering experience for me. Tristan was really great about it, trying to keep me calm. I cried a little bit because I was so anxious. Um, Baby sounded good and healthy. The OB came in, and this is at around 3 o'clock, by the way, in the morning. Um, the OB comes in, and I tell her that, I think I peed myself, but it could have been like my water breaking. Um, and that I'm having these cramps and the bleeding, and how I was here like a week or two previous thinking that I had my bloody show, and all that jazz. And so she does a cervical exam, and my water wasn't broken yet. However, I was already 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. Um, and so I was in early labor. However, that was not ideal, because I was only 32, almost 33 weeks along. And so they wanted to try and stop my labor. So the first thing they had to do was give me an IV. I had never had an IV. This was a huge reason why I didn't want to birth at the hospital. There is a chance that I maybe could have said no because the IV was only to keep me hydrated. They weren't administering any medications through it. Um, Tristan attempted to advocate for me, but I was just in so much pain that I was just like, do whatever. Like, I don't care anymore. Except I did care a bit because I was scared out of my mind. I was I wasn't actually having any tears, but I was having a full-on anxiety attack. Um and they tried 4 different spots. So they tried my hand, they tried this hand, they tried my wrist, and they couldn't get any of those spots, which are for them more ideal. For me, less ideal because I found that extremely painful. And eventually they had to just do my elbow pit. That one was by far the least painful, and by that point I was so dissociated. I was just like laying there unresponsive, because I was just having such a huge anxiety attack about it. And I will say at this point, I still didn't connect that I was in labor. I was just, everything was such a frenzy and so chaotic. Tristan understood that I was in labor. But I was still scared about the fact that it felt like a miscarriage. So it hadn't dawned on me yet that I was in labor. After they got the IV in, I calmed down quite a bit, except for the fact that I was in a lot of pain from being in labor. But the anxiety went away. At this point, any emotion I was feeling was due to being in quite severe pain. They got me to turn on this side, and they gave me an injection in this hip with morphine and I think something else, like a painkiller. I will say it didn't help a whole lot. So before the injection, I was constantly experiencing pain. I was experiencing really high pains during the contractions themselves, and then I was still in pain, although somewhat lesser, in between contractions. The morphine made it so I wasn't in pain in between contractions, but it did not dull the pain of the actual contractions at all. But it was still nice to be able to have that actual break in between contractions. And then they got me to rotate to my other hip, and they gave me a steroid for baby. So the hope is that they were going to be able to stop the labor, keep baby in here just a couple weeks longer, and this steroid was going to help their lungs develop faster, so that if I did again go into labor prematurely, at least their lungs would be better. And then they were getting ready to give me oral medication that was supposed to slow and stop the cramps. But before they could administer that to me, my water broke. I was laying on the bed and it was just a huge gush. And that's when it finally clicked into my brain that I was in labor. At this point, it's probably like somewhere between 4 and 5 a.m. And the OB does another cervical exam, confirms that I did just indeed have my water broken. And so they were no longer able to try and stop the labor. The labor was just happening now. And even though just an hour or two previous, I was only 1 to 2 centimeters dilated, at this point, I was 9 centimeters dilated. She could feel that either a bum or a head was engaged. So they did a quick little ultrasound to make sure that it was baby's head and that baby wasn't breech, and it was baby's head. I continued to labor a little bit longer, and then it was quickly time for me to push. I pushed a total of about 3 times, and baby was here, and the pain relief was so immediate. It was insane. I was quite in shock, though. Unfortunately, because baby was so early, I was not able to immediately hold them. They immediately went to the side with the NICU people, and they were okay, but they needed to go straight to the NICU because their lungs weren't fully developed and they needed help breathing. So I told Tristan to go with them, and there's a chunk of time there where I don't know what was happening with baby because I had to stay and birth my placenta, which took longer than normal apparently. A lot of people talk about how they find that this part is also really painful. I did not find that. I just kind of hung out, chit chatted with the nurse and the OB. I think it took about a half an hour or more for my placenta to actually come out. And then they had to push on my stomach a bunch to expel more blood because they didn't want like blood just sitting inside of me. Again, people talk about this being extremely painful, and while I wouldn't say it was comfortable, I did not find it that painful. I bled more than average. Nothing that was like extremely concerning, but still more than average. Once that was all done, they took me to the showers where I attempted to bathe myself or like shower. I kind of just wet my hair. I didn't wash it, and I very, loosely washed my body. Although it was a very hot shower that I was having. So I get out of the shower and I start, drying myself off. I get my disposable underwear and pad on, and I managed to get like the front of my robe on, and I'm starting to feel faint. So I had to like pull the like call emergency cord, and I sat down and the nurses came in and I passed out. I wasn't out for like any duration of time, really. It was kind of like I was out and back and a little bit like that as they continued to help me dress. It was just because one, of a lot of blood loss, and two, because I turned that shower room into a sauna. And so they got me dressed, put me in a wheelchair, gave me some juice, all that good stuff. And then they brought me to see baby. I will say finally at this point that baby is a boy, and his first name is Silas. His middle name is Parker. So they took me to go see Silas in the NICU. I was really in a daze at this point because I was still coming to after having passed out. I was absolutely exhausted. But I find out there that he was born at 6:26 in the morning. So I was only at the hospital for 3.5 hours before he was here. And he weighed 4 pounds and 9 ounces. He had an IV in and had a CPAP on to help with his breathing. He wasn't getting any, they weren't giving him, additional oxygen. He was using all room air. The CPAP was just, focusing it on his face, I guess, and forcing him to breathe it in. But he didn't need, extra oxygen or anything like that. I said hi to him. I couldn't hold him still because he was in an incubator to regulate his temperature. Um, I didn't stay for too long because I was literally so drained. So they took me, we spent the money to rent a private room for me so I could stay for 5 days with Silas. So they took me back there and I went right to sleep and took a nap. Um, when I woke up, I went back and saw Silas in the NICU, and then I started my pumping journey. Um, if you don't know much about breastfeeding and pumping and lactation and all of that, when you first give birth, your milk hasn't come in yet, but you typically are already uh, making what's called colostrum, or like your first milk. It comes in very small amounts and it's very nutrient dense. Um, it's different consistency and color from regular milk. But I started off pumping with that. I was only getting like a millimeter or a milliliter at a time, but that's quite normal. And I was pumping every 2 to 3 hours. Um, and beyond that, that was kind of the first day, like going and seeing Silas, pumping, all that. Second day was, a lot of the same. I was starting to make a bit more colostrum, about, I think, 5 milliliters a pump, and that's like from both sides mixed together. Um, Third day, the same, but my milk was came in that night, or started to. Um, and I quickly had to start using bigger, like, milk collecting containers rather than the small little colostrum containers. That night, I got permission to leave the hospital for a little bit, and Tristan and I went to supper. I had my first alcoholic drink since before the pregnancy. Had some really good food, and yeah. Fourth and fifth night, kind of the same deal. Pumping more and more each time until I was pumping too much for the hospital milk containers, unless I wanted to have like two. And even then, it was like becoming too much even for two. So then I changed over to the milk collection bags that I had bought prior to the labor, and I've been using those since. I'm currently overproducing by a lot. I don't know if that's just because Silas is too small to be able to keep up right now, and like he'll be able to keep up later, or if I'm just an over producer in general. If the amount of milk and what Silas can consume doesn't balance out over the next couple months, I'm gonna consider donating my milk if I can, but it's kind of a process to do that. My recovery was really easy, which I'm very fortunate about. I did not tear, so I didn't need any stitches. My bleeding has been fine. I haven't really had any pain. My fibro has been flaring a little bit since the labor, but nothing like too extreme. I think the worst was once my milk came in. I have what's called auxiliary breast tissue in my armpits, especially this armpit, which is not uncommon, but in your armpits there are like milk ducts, and this armpit was so engorged. It was insane. It's way better now. Um, but I think that was probably the weirdest and most painful part of recovery. Um, as for Silas, he has been doing really good. For the first handful of days, he had a IV, he had his CPAP, feeding tube, and there was 2 days where he was doing phototherapy for jaundice, and he was in an incubator. But for the last handful of days, he's been IV free, CPAP free, phototherapy free, and just yesterday, I believe it was, I came into the hospital and he was no longer in an incubator. He was just like in a like little plastic bassinet crib thing, like a regular baby. Um, and he actually had clothes on because up to this point he was in the incubator wearing just a diaper, but he was all clothed and swaddled in blankets, and he's been a lot happier since all of these changes. Um, at this point, we're just really waiting for him to gain some more weight and be old enough to leave. Um, he still has his feeding tube, but yesterday we started working on breastfeeding. Right now, they get me to pump before, like right before I feed him, especially since I make so much milk. Like, as one nurse said, I would waterboard him if I was to try and feed him unpumped. And then they put uh, food hooked, like they put my breast milk hooked up to the feeding tube, and while the feeding tube is doing its work, I am trying to get him to latch. The goal right now isn't to get him to actually feed off my breast, but it's for him to associate that his belly gets full if my nipple is in his mouth. Um, and as he gets more used to that, he'll actually start suckling and whatnot, and hopefully, as we progress, he will be off a feeding tube and just on the boob. But yeah, that's kind of the whole thing. While I was in the hospital, Tristan and a couple friends did a lot of work to get the nursery um, all painted, and Tristan also did some crown molding all on the bottom half of the walls. Hi, Mango. Mango has been very sooky since I got home from the hospital. Um, I think he can tell something's different. Um, and yeah, he's just been a big old sook. Trying to think if there's anything else. But I think that's everything. I weighed myself the other night to see how much I've lost over the last week just from birthing Silas. And I have lost 20-ish pounds, a little bit less, but rounding up a little, I've lost about 20 pounds, which puts me approximately 10 pounds lighter than I was when I first, like, right before I got pregnant. So I've somehow managed to actually, like, lose weight, which I'm not complaining about. Once we get Silas home, which I'm hoping is going to be mid October, but it could be up until like his due date technically. But he's doing so good that I don't think he'll be that long. But once he's home and we've got a good routine going, I'm going to, I think, work on exercising and fixing my abdominal wall because pregnancy kind of ruined it. And all of that good stuff. Um, but yeah, we're just really looking forward to having him home. It's a lot of work right now coordinating us going to see him in the hospital 2 to 3 times a day, and also looking after Ponyo because Ponyo has a schedule where she's awake for an hour and then sleeps for 2 hours, and that over and over again all day until 11 p.m. And then she's in bed till 5 a.m., where I take her out to pee and then put her back, and then she stays in bed until 10 a.m. and then the day starts and she has her first wake hour. So we're very fortunate that we coincidentally have a friend staying with us for a couple months because she needed a place to stay after moving. And so having her here has been a really big help. She looked after Ponyo completely for the first full day after I gave birth. And then her and Tristan together took turns looking after Ponyo while I was in the hospital and he was coming to visit us. There was one day where she took a shift at work, and a different friend came over for the day and worked from his laptop at our house and looked after Ponyo all day. There was a morning where I wanted to go see Silas, but our roommate wasn't available, and so another friend came and did Ponyo's morning shift. So I've just been really blessed and fortunate to have such a great support system here. But life will be a lot easier once Silas is home and we can look after him and Ponyo at the same time. Yeah, okay, I think for real that's it. Obviously I don't have a bump anymore, but I can show you my lack thereof. I think this is kind of the majority of my, what do you call it, like I think this is about what my stomach is going to look like postpartum. I think technically my uterus is still shrinking a little bit, so like I might lose a little bit more bump, but I think that's pretty much it. And honestly, I feel so good. I'm exhausted still, but it's a much different kind of exhaustion, and it's a much more fulfilling exhaustion. And I love having my squishy belly back. It's taken some getting used to like have to be able to squish, because I got so used to having like a fully like tight hard stomach, but it feels so good to have my body back. I definitely still think pregnancy is a beautiful thing, and in the future I'll probably do it 1 to 2 more times. But I gotta say, I don't really love being pregnant like some people do. I'm very grateful that I was able to. in that I, stayed pregnant long enough to have my baby. Um, but I don't understand how some people just do baby back to back to back to back like for a decade. uh, that won't be me, even though I thought it would be. Um, but it is what it is, right? But yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop. I could ramble forever, and this video is already over a half an hour long. So, um, thank you for watching and listening. This might be my last video. I might do another video like when the nursery's done, or when Silas comes home, maybe, and just do one or two more final updates. But we'll see. This very well could be the last one. So thank you for following me on this journey. I've been incredibly blessed and appreciative of everyone's support over the pregnancy and since birth. And maybe I'll talk to you next time. Bye.